When Xingxian watched Wang Zhong and the others turn and leave, then smiled and looked at Mu Chun, saying, "It seems you've gained another opponent. Sorry, I've caused you trouble." Although it was an apology, Mu Chun couldn't hear any sincerity in her words. On the contrary, he felt more of a sense of schadenfreude, which made him roll his eyes and mutter, "The relationship between our Northern Song Spiritual Academy and the Sacred Spirit Academy was never good. Even if this hadn't happened, once we enter the Wood God Temple ruins, conflict was inevitable." He saw it clearly. Though he had no grievances with Wang Zhong before, judging by the latter's personality, peaceful coexistence was out of the question. So, regardless of whether Mu Chun had offended him, once Wang Zhong got the chance, his ruthless nature would show no mercy. Therefore, Mu Chun didn't believe that if it weren't for Wen Qingxian, they would have coexisted peacefully with Wang Zhong and his group. When Qingxian raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by how open-minded Mu Chun was, she then smiled and said, "You're being so magnanimous that I've turned into a troublesome, spoiled girl. Who dares?" Mu Chun rolled his eyes, then took Luo Li's slender hand, saying with satisfaction, "After all, not every girl is as understanding as my Luo Li." Upon hearing this, Wen Qingxuan's eyebrows immediately twitched, and she, too, reached out with her jade hand to take hold of Luo Li's other hand, flashing a seductive smile. "Indeed, that's why I also like Luo Li so much. How about you, stinky man? Stay away from her. Whatever condition you want, I'll agree to it." "Really, any condition?" Mu Chun grinned, eyeing Wen Qingxuan's graceful figure. Seeing his gaze, the smile on Wen Qingxuan's face became even more enchanting. "Why don't you try and ask? If you don't say it, how would I know if it's possible?" Mu Chun stared at Wen Qingxian, clearly noticing a hint of cunning and teasing in her beautiful eyes. He smiled and shook his head. This girl wasn't an easy one to deal with. She was always setting traps for him. If he wasn't careful, he'd end up with nothing left but bones. Not brave enough? When Qingxian pouted, clearly unimpressed, Luo Li, seeing the two always at odds, could only smile helplessly. Mu Chun chose to ignore Wen Qingxuan's provocation. Instead, he looked around. As time passed, more and more teams arrived, and their impressive numbers made the scene appear quite spectacular. 6 Wood God tokens. "I think maybe the 3 factions each hold one," Mu Chun said, his gaze fixed on Xuetiandu, the Alliance of Academies, and Wang Zhong's group. He had 1 Wood God token himself, so he could sense a faintly familiar aura coming from them. Now that it was time to discuss serious matters, when Qingxian stopped teasing Mu Chun, she surveyed the area and said, "Including the Wood God token in your possession, that makes 4. To open the next layer of the spiritual array outside Wood God Mountain, we still need 2 more Wood God tokens. I wonder which factions have the other 2, Mu Chun mused. Any team capable of obtaining a Wood God token would undoubtedly be formidable. We'll know soon enough. Since they've managed to get the Wood God tokens, they'll certainly come to Wood God Mountain. Otherwise, the tokens would be useless," Luo Li said with a smile. Mu Chun nodded and didn't speak further, silently waiting for the final 2 Wood God token bearers to appear. Time slowly passed, and the noise around them grew louder. Every team was eagerly waiting for the opening of the imposing Wood God Mountain, which loomed like an ancient beast. Standing atop the massive tree, Mu Chun slightly closed his eyes. After about 10 minutes, his expression shifted, and his tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. His gaze swept to the west and east, where the sound of wind piercing the air sharply echoed. Whoosh! Under the gazes of countless onlookers, 2 streams of light shot toward them. As they slowed down and the brightness dimmed, 2 groups of people gradually became visible. On the left, there were roughly 4 teams, each displaying a different academy's emblem on their chests. They were clearly from various spiritual academies, but what amazed everyone was that these individuals were radiating a staggering amount of spiritual power. They're from the 4 Seas Spiritual Academy. 4 Seas Spiritual Academy? Mu Chun was momentarily stunned, his eyes also filled with surprise. The so-called 4 Seas Spiritual Academy didn't refer to a single academy, but rather a collective name for 4 academies, each named after one of the 4 seas, East, South, West, and North, hence the name 4 Seas Spiritual Academy. This academy was somewhat unique because, individually, none of the 4 academies would be considered top tier. However, when combined, their strength could rival that of the 5 great academies. The reason for this was that the founders of these 4 academies were all the same person. Their cultivation methods also had similarities, and when they worked together, their power would surge. In the past, due to internal reasons, the 4C's Spiritual Academy rarely participated in the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. But unexpectedly, this year, they had appeared. The Spiritual Academy Grand Competition really is full of hidden talents. Mu Chen sighed. As time passed, these powerful teams, which had been lurking in the shadows, began to show themselves one by one. He couldn't help but wonder how many dark horses would appear when the final battle came. This year's competition is definitely the toughest in recent years, when Xun'er nodded. In previous competitions, while there were challenges, the 5 great academies had always maintained a clear advantage. But this time, that advantage was much weaker. It's unlikely that the 5 great academies will dominate the competition this year, Luoli said softly. In the previous Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, apart from Northern Song's Spiritual Academy, the other 4 of the 5 great academies had multiple teams in the competition. However, this year, it seemed that wouldn't be the case, as all the participating teams were extraordinarily strong. Mu Chen nodded and then turned his gaze towards the western direction, where another team had just emerged. As this group of people appeared, Mu Chen was momentarily stunned, because at the head of the team was a young girl dressed in a bright red gown. She carried an enormous thunder glaive, which was larger than her own height. The blade of the glaive was blood red, as though stained with fresh blood. The girl had a fair, delicate face, and her long hair was tied into a high ponytail. Her slender waist swayed, and her perky hips moved with every step. This was a girl who seemed to exude a unique personality. "Hey, it's her!" When Xun'er and Luo Li both exclaimed in surprise upon seeing the girl in red, clearly recognizing her. "It's her!" Mu Chen also exclaimed in surprise. However, unlike the tone of when Xun'er and Luo Li, his voice was somewhat odd, and his face darkened as he looked at the girl in red. "You know her?" Luo Li asked with some confusion. She had seen this girl in the Spirit Road, at the very end of it. At that time, Mu Chen should have already been expelled from the Spirit Road, so how could he know her? Mu Chen's lips twitched slightly, and he forced a dry laugh. "I should have known her before I knew you. She was the first person I met when I entered the Spirit Road." Mu Chen's gaze flickered, and he subtly turned his body, seemingly trying to avoid the girl's gaze. He certainly wouldn't forget that the first person he met when entering the Spirit Road, or perhaps the first opponent, was this madwoman named Wu Yingying. He remembered it vividly because at that time, in front of him was a stream with no fish, but there was a naked, fair-skinned mermaid. At that time, Wu Yingying was clearly bathing. The rest of the story was easy to guess. Feeling the murderous intent rising from the stream, Mu Chen, although initially running away, had underestimated the girl's agility and fiery temper. She quickly put on her clothes and chased after him with the glaive. Mu Chen had struggled with her for nearly an entire day, getting 2 cuts, but in the end, he won. However, back then, he wasn't as decisive in battle as he was now, so after winning, frustrated, he pinned the fiery girl on his lap, slapped her snow-white backside a few times, and then threw her into the water, leaving her fuming in shame as he walked away. After that, Mu Chen never encountered this spicy girl again. It was clear that what he had done to Wu Yingying was not something he could tell Luo Li. At this moment, his scalp tingled, and he could only try to move backward, dodging his body to avoid being seen by Wu Yingying. However, the more one fears something, the more it comes. As Mu Chen tried to avoid her gaze, Wu Yingying's eyes from not far away locked onto him. Without surprise, her gaze froze on him. In that instant, Mu Chen could almost feel that Wu Yingying seemed to be stunned. He raised his head and looked at the girl not far from him. Her originally cold, oval face quickly flushed bright red at an incredible speed. Her bright eyes burned with fury, like a volcano about to erupt. "Mu Chen, I'll kill you." As a stiff smile appeared on Mu Chen's face, the girl's near-roaring voice echoed through the noisy surroundings. Her enraged roar rang through the sky, causing countless people to freeze in place. They stared in shock at Wu Yingying, whose fair face had suddenly turned bright red. In her beautiful eyes, fury seemed to erupt like a tangible force, as though she wanted to burn someone to ashes. A wave of glances shifted, finally locking onto Mu Chun, who looked somewhat embarrassed not far away. Luo Li and Wen Qingxian looked at Mu Chun with puzzled expressions. Clearly, they didn't know why Wu Yingying reacted this way when she saw him. What's wrong with her? Wen Qingxian asked, her adorable twin siblings behind her also staring wide-eyed in surprise. Maybe she's not feeling well, Mu Chun said with a dry laugh. Boom. A surge of spiritual energy, carrying fury, exploded from Wu Yingying's delicate body. Her jade hand grabbed the massive scarlet crescent moon blade, her eyes burning with murderous intent. With a sharp step, she flew forward, slashing downward with unmatched blade light, aimed directly at Mu Chun. Pervert, I'll kill you. Along with the furious blade light came Wu Yingying's roar, which was as ferocious as a small tigress ready to devour someone, terrifying in every way. Pervert. Wen Qingxian and the others stared at Mu Chun, and then Wen Qingxian covered her mouth and smiled. TSK, so you have a love debt outside. Looks like you've been sneaking around behind Luo Li's back, right? Mu Chun awkwardly smiled and glanced at Luo Li. She gave him a light glance, but the smile that wasn't quite a smile in her clear eyes made him break into a cold sweat. I'll deal with her first, then explain, Mu Chun said with a forced laugh. He immediately moved to escape, as neither Luo Li nor Wen Qingxian showed any signs of helping him fend off the attack. He would have to handle it himself. Boom. Black lightning spread from Mu Chun's body. He gripped his hand and a black spear appeared. The spiritual energy surged like a rainbow, and the spear radiance shot out, colliding fiercely with the descending blade light. Clang! The sound of metal striking metal rang out as violent winds roared. The blade light and spear radiance spread out, and Mu Chun's body slightly trembled. His hand, gripping the dragon-devouring spear, felt a numbness. His eyes involuntarily revealed a hint of surprise. Wu Yingying's strength was far stronger than he had expected. From his estimate, her power might even rival that of the 3 leaders of the Alliance of Academies. Bad luck, Mu Chun thought, silently lamenting. Who would have thought that this opponent he met first on the Spirit Road wasn't a simple one? Humph! Wu Yingying, seeing that her blade was blocked by Mu Chun, was also somewhat surprised. She snorted coldly, and her slender body leaped forward. Her fierce blade light, like a storm, attacked him relentlessly. Hey, are you done yet? Mu Chun, startled by her almost desperate fighting style, quickly dodged and shouted, I'll kill you, just you wait. Wu Yingying gritted her teeth. Her gaze locked onto Mu Chun. She struck with even more ferocity. The blade light wreaked havoc, almost tearing the air apart. Mu Chun had no choice. He stood firm in midair, holding his spear. The immense spiritual energy surged as he drew arc after arc of spear radiance, perfectly blocking Wu Yingying's furious onslaught without a single flaw. Boom! Everyone looked up at the spiritual storm erupting in the sky, 2 figures flashing through the air like lightning. Wu Yingying's strength took many by surprise. Who could have guessed that this seemingly delicate girl could be so ruthless? Hey, looks like she's got a lot of enemies. Seems like the Wood God Mountain ruins are going to be quite the battlefield for her. Qin Feng, the 3rd leader of the Alliance of Academies, chuckled with a malicious grin. The 2nd leader, Mou, also smiled faintly, his eyes narrowing as he watched the fierce battle unfold in the sky. None of the onlookers interfered. Everyone kept their distance, coldly watching. It was clear that both Mu Chun and Wu Yingying had strong backing, so they were eager to see them tear each other apart outside the Wood God Mountain. Clang! Blades and spears collided again, a violent wind sweeping through the air, as if tearing space itself apart. Mu Chun floated back, gazing helplessly at Wu Yingying, whose gaze was as ferocious as a wild tigress. Do you really want us to fight to the death here? People are watching us like we're monkeys in a show. Is that what you want? Wu Yingying paused mid-charge, then coldly sneered. What's wrong? Didn't you have a lot of guts before? Now you're scared? It was all a misunderstanding, Chen explained. Whoosh. Before he could finish, a sharp blade light slashed toward him. He quickly raised his spear to block it, only to meet Wu Yingying's fiery gaze. What do you want from me? Chen groaned, rubbing his temples. I want to kill you. Wu Yingying hissed through gritted teeth. Please, I'm not that hateful. You know what happened on the Spirit Road. Back then, I could have killed you and it would have been justified. But look, I even let you go, Chen defended himself. Let me go? Wu Yingying's face flushed with rage. This bastard had stripped her bare, groped her all over, and then tossed her into the water. For a girl, that was worse than death. Chen smiled awkwardly, feeling guilty. He'd certainly had some playful intentions back then, but after all, she had slashed him with 2 bloody cuts. Kill yourself here, and I'll spare you. Wu Yingying threatened harshly. Chen rubbed his face and sighed. Am I really that stupid? Then let me kill you. Wu Yingying's sharp gaze pierced through him, and she moved to strike again. Yingying! A voice suddenly rang out from behind. It was the group that had followed Wu Yingying earlier. A tall man stepped forward, blocking her path. He glanced warily at Chen, then sighed at Wu Yingying. We came for the ruins. Fighting here is not appropriate. Wu Yingying snorted, ignoring him and glaring fiercely at Chen. At this moment, when Qingxian, Luoli, and the others also arrived, standing beside Chen. When Qingxian seemed quite interested, glancing between Chen and Wu Yingying. Is this Chen, the team leader from the Northern Song Spiritual Academy? The tall man asked with a friendly smile. I'm Deng Tong, from the Wu Ling Academy. Chen paused, surprised. He exchanged looks with Wu Yingying. So, Deng Tong was from the Wu Ling Academy, which meant Wu Yingying was also from there. Ah, so it's team leader Deng Tong, Chen said, smiling as he cupped his hands. Yingying, do you know Chen? What's the issue with him? Maybe it's a misunderstanding. If we talk about it, everything can be resolved, Deng Tong said, smiling again. But he was puzzled. Wu Yingying's anger didn't seem fake. Although she usually had a fiery temper, he had never seen her this angry before. Ask him. Wu Yingying snapped, pointing a slender finger at Chen. Her teeth gritted. Chen froze, scratching his nose. Should I just say it? No. Wu Yingying's eyes widened with fury. Chen awkwardly smiled, while Deng Tong and the others looked on in confusion, clearly not understanding what was going on between them. Wu Yingying noticed their confused expressions and blushed slightly, then shot Chen a fierce glare. You're asking for it, you pervert. Hearing her call out, perverted Luoli, once again. When Qingxian and the others couldn't help but cast suspicious glances at Chen. Chen's mouth twitched, and he felt a deep sense of sorrow as if his good name was being ruined. After Wu Yingying finished speaking, she directly dragged her scarlet thunder glaive and turned to leave. Seeing her finally calm down, Deng Tong and the others let out a sigh of relief and cupped their fists at Chen before quickly following her. Chen breathed a sigh of relief as well and turned around, only to meet Wen Qingxuan's teasing gaze. Luoli, looking at Wu Yingying's expression, she seems to have suffered quite an injustice. This might not be as simple as it seems, Wen Qingxian said with a playful laugh. Seeing Wen Qingxian stir the pot, Chen shot her a sharp glare. Luoli smiled faintly, her expression calm and serene as she glanced at Chen and said with understanding, if it's inconvenient for you to talk, then you don't have to say anything. Chen gave a dry laugh. Although Luoli said that, he felt like if he didn't speak up, things would only get worse. I already mentioned it before, Wu Yingying was the first person I met when I entered the Spirit Road. Chen shrugged and briefly explained the past. Of course, he simplified it greatly, only mentioning how he had given her a harsh lesson. After all, when he taught Wu Yingying a lesson back then, he certainly didn't have any pure intentions. That's it. When Qingxian chuckled, then why does she look at you like a heartless scoundrel, swearing to kill you if she doesn't get her revenge? Chen smirked, you're not my wife, why should I explain myself to you? When Qingxian raised her eyebrows and sneered, seems like you haven't been beaten enough by her. All right, Luoli shook her head helplessly, giving Chen a playful look. Just be careful. Wu Yingying doesn't look like someone who will give up easily. This is your mess, and I'm not going to help you. Mu Chun nodded repeatedly. BTTH, when Qing Xian pouted, clearly frustrated that this annoying man had once again evaded the issue. Buzz. Just as Mu Chun was feeling relieved, the spiritual energy in the air seemed to fluctuate, and everyone saw the enormous Wood God Mountain surrounded by radiant light patterns, like a giant spiritual array enveloping it. As the ancient and massive spiritual array appeared, Mu Chun clenched his fist, and the Wood God steel materialized. It radiated intense heat, emitting a steady warmth. Buzz, buzz. Emerald light surged from the Wood God steel, forming a glowing orb that spread out. At the same time, in the other 5 directions, Alliance of Academies, Sacred Spirit Academy, Blood Tiandu, Wu Yingying, and 4 Seas Spiritual Academy, 5 other light orbs appeared. Finally, 6 beams of light shot forth and struck the massive ancient spiritual array around Wood God Mountain. Boom! The spiritual energy surged as the crowd gazed eagerly at the scene, knowing that this was a sign that the ancient relic hidden within the spiritual array was about to be unlocked. Buzz, buzz. The 6 majestic light beams pierced the heavens, and under the scorching gaze of countless onlookers, they struck the massive ancient spiritual array around Wood God Mountain. As the beams hit, the array rippled, sending waves outward like stones dropped into a pond. Mu Chun and the others kept their eyes locked on the enormous ancient spiritual array. This array was likely the protective formation of the Wood Divine Temple from ancient times, powerful beyond measure. Not even ordinary supreme powerhouses could break through it. Therefore, they could only hope that the Wood God Steel would indeed be able to unlock it. Otherwise, they would be left helplessly staring at the treasure mountain in front of them. Buzz. Fortunately, the worst-case scenario did not occur. As the 6 light beams converged, the ancient spiritual array began to show cracks, and those cracks slowly widened until they formed a massive rift several hundred feet long. With the appearance of this enormous rift, it felt as though an ancient hurricane surged out from within, sweeping through the entire area, causing the world to feel more rugged and wild. The glowing rift slowly stabilized, like a massive gateway, slowly opening, leading to the true relic passed down from the ancient era. Many people quietly swallowed their saliva, their eyes burning with intense heat. Would Divine Hall ruins have been opened? Someone suddenly roared, and the once peaceful world exploded into chaos. Countless waves of spiritual energy shot into the sky, and figures moved as fast as lightning, rushing toward the massive rift. Go! Mu Chun reacted quickly. As the rift stabilized, he shouted and rushed out first. Behind him, Luoli, Wen Qingxian, and the others followed closely, their speed equally swift as a shooting star. The enormous rift stretched across the ancient spiritual array, resembling a giant mouth from ancient times, devouring countless light shadows that surged in like locusts. In just a few minutes, the once crowded and bustling world became empty, only a mess on the ground as evidence of the earlier commotion. In the distance, teams were rushing toward the site in a hurry. Clearly, a battle for the ruins had begun, one that would shake the entire Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. Who would eventually gain the most from this ruin? It would depend on which side proved to be more skilled. As Mu Chun and the others entered the giant rift, the light around them suddenly brightened. Before them appeared a towering mountain that seemed to cover the sky. No matter which direction they looked, they could see no end. This ancient mountain was terrifyingly massive. Mu Chun and the others were stunned by the scale, but soon they quickly descended onto a mountain peak. The environment here was bathed in a verdant green, brimming with life. The spiritual energy in the air was unusually active. This heightened spiritual energy caused their faces to tense up, as they realized that manipulating the local spiritual energy was much harder than in the outside world. This must be a special cultivation method of the Wood Divine Hall. If we adapt to this place, our ability to manipulate spiritual energy will increase when we return to the outside world, Wen Qingxian said, raising her delicate hand and launching a spiritual energy beam that shattered a towering tree in the distance. However, if we engage in battle here, Our spiritual energy consumption will increase as well, Luoli said, her expression serious. Thankfully, we prepared some battle pills, Mu Chen smiled, glancing at Wen Qingxian, admiring her foresight. Wen Qingxian, noticing his gaze, smiled with pride. After spending some time together, she realized that while Mu Chen appeared kind, he was actually quite proud inside. Gaining his admiration wasn't an easy feat. What do we do next? Luoli asked Mu Chen. Mu Chen looked up. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of wind being broken, and light figures were raining down onto the ancient mountain. The once quiet place was now disturbed. Soon, teams would swarm in like locusts, scavenging all the ancient treasures left behind. Mu Chen's gaze shifted to the distance. What he sought most in the Wood Divine Hall ruins was not just the so-called inheritance, but the 9 Sun spirit fungus. It was an essential material for his future cultivation of the Great Sun indestructible body. He knew how rare and precious this treasure was, capable of attracting the envy of supreme powerhouses. In the outside world, with his current strength, it was impossible to obtain such a spirit treasure. But now, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and he had to seize it. In this Wood Divine Hall ruins, there should be a spiritual treasure mountain. That mountain contains many rare treasures, including a spirit item I need. I want to go there first, Mu Chen said, looking at Wen Qingxian. Since they were cooperating with her, he felt the need to clarify his intentions. Spiritual treasure mountain? Mu Chen was momentarily speechless. Under normal circumstances, what he did makes sense, but there was the pressing matter of the 9 Sun spirit fungus. If he arrived late and someone else beat him to it, when would he have another chance to get news of it? His action was undeniably beneficial to him, but it wasn't so clear-cut for Wen Qingxian and the others. After spending some time with her, Mu Chen realized that Wen Qingxian was a strong-willed girl and quite dominant. In her past collaborations, she probably always took the lead, with others just following her orders. Mu Chen didn't have much confidence in getting this proud and talented woman to fully follow his plan. As Mu Chen was unsure how to respond, Wen Qingxuan's expression suddenly shifted from indifferent to a beaming smile. She waved her jade-like hand and said, "Though your choice might not be entirely right, I'll trust you this time. But I'm warning you, if I don't find anything satisfactory in that so-called spiritual treasure mountain, I will hold you accountable." Mu Chen looked at her quick change of expression and could only shake his head helplessly. Wen Qingxuan's difficult nature was on par with Luoli's when he first met her. Back then, Luoli hadn't wasted a word and had directly chased him for half a year, sword in hand. But this Wood Divine Hall ruins is vast. Do you even know where spiritual treasure mountain is? Are you really planning to search aimlessly? Luoli suddenly asked. Mu Chen paused, then gave a bitter smile and nodded. That was indeed his plan, but he hadn't expected the Wood Divine Hall ruins to be this large. Unbelievable. You're still here treasure hunting without any plan? Wen Qingxian gave him a disapproving look. Do you have any ideas? Mu Chen looked at her. Since you say there are plenty of spiritual treasures in the spiritual treasure mountain, it must have been the spiritual treasure garden of the Wood Divine Hall in ancient times, a place dedicated to cultivating treasures. Many major forces and large clans have similar places. These places share one common trait, Wen Qingxian said with a slight smile, appearing graceful. They're always located in areas with the strongest flow of natural spiritual energy. Mu Chen scratched his nose. Coming from the northern spirit realm, a small place, he wasn't familiar with such high-level matters. Although his father was the so-called Lord of the Mu domain, that kind of power had no standing to establish a spiritual treasure garden. For something only large, well-established forces were qualified to manage, he had no knowledge at all. So, he could only ask again, how do we detect the places with the strongest flow of natural spiritual energy? Of course, you need a specially crafted spiritual artifact to do that. Do you think we can sense it with our own power? Wen Qingxian rolled her eyes at him. We don't have that kind of thing. Mu Chen's face turned red, slightly embarrassed and irritated. Useless man, Wen Qingxian sighed. She then waved her hand, and immediately, Enya, who had been quietly standing behind her, produced a glowing orb from her hand. Inside it, there was a compass-like spiritual artifact, and you handed it to Wen Qingxian. When Qingxian grasped the artifact, channeled her spiritual power, and activated it, Mu Chen saw that the needle-like light on the compass began to spin rapidly. After a while, the compass shot out a beam of light, which shifted like an arrow, pointing northwest. It's detected. Head in that direction, and you should find the spiritual treasure mountain. When Qingxian stored the compass away and looked at Mu Chen with a playful smile. Are you convinced now? Mu Chen felt a bit awkward, thinking that he was being looked down upon as a bumpkin. Let's go, he muttered, irritated but resigned. Seeing his reaction, Luo Li couldn't help but laugh and shake her head. She reached out her hand and took his, offering him some comfort. Nothing like your own wife, Mu Chen grinned, holding her delicate hand and leaning in to kiss her smooth, jade-like cheek. Luo Li's face flushed at his sudden move, and she could only glare at him with a mix of embarrassment and affection. Shameless! When Qingxian snapped, her teeth clenched, glaring at Mu Chen. Haha, let's go. Mu Chen couldn't help but laugh aloud, completely ignoring Wen Qingxian. He grabbed Luo Li, and with a wave of spiritual power, they transformed into two streaks of light, shooting off towards the distance. Behind them, Wen Qingxian stomped her jade foot in anger and chased after them. Soon after, Su Huang and the others hurriedly followed. Whoosh! In the lush, ancient mountain range, the sound of the wind breaking echoed as streaks of light shot across the sky. The high speed created a pressure that carved deep grooves into the forest below. With his body wrapped in vast spiritual power, Mu Chen looked down at the mountains rushing beneath him. As he gazed into the distance, he still couldn't see the end. Clearly, Wood God Mountain was vast to an almost terrifying extent. In other directions, Mu Chen could sense many fluctuations of spiritual power. These were likely other teams who had entered the area. The arrival of such large teams had undoubtedly disturbed the usual tranquility of Wood God Mountain. The surging spiritual energy filled the air, adding some life to the ruins that, although vibrant, had never felt truly alive. As they sped towards Spiritual Treasure Mountain, Mu Chen's gaze frequently shifted to the glowing compass in Wen Qingxuan's jade hand. The light outside the compass was constantly trembling, subtly guiding them in the right direction. Mu Chen had learned of Spiritual Treasure Mountain's location from the Wood God Stele. There were 6 of these steles in total, so he wasn't sure if the other owners of the steles had received the same information. Therefore, he had to rush there as quickly as possible, ahead of everyone else, and seize the 9-sun spirit fungus before anyone else could. He knew just how tempting the 9-sun spirit fungus was. Even if others couldn't cultivate the great sun indestructible body, this spiritual treasure was exceedingly rare and contained terrifying spiritual power. Whether absorbed directly or used in alchemy, it was a top-tier choice. Not only people like them, but even supreme powerhouses would covet it. So, once the others learned about the 9-sun spirit fungus, Mu Chen was certain that no one would be able to resist the temptation. He pursed his lips, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. The great sun indestructible body was vital for his future advancement into the supreme stage. Therefore, he absolutely wouldn't let anyone else have the 9-sun spirit fungus. Regardless of who tried to stop him, he would show no mercy. Whoosh! With a sharp gleam in his eyes, Mu Chen's speed surged once more. In the blink of an eye, his form turned into a streak of light that appeared 100 yards ahead. Behind him, Luo Li, Wen Qingxian, and the others quickly followed. They flew over towering peaks, and after about 10 minutes, the lush landscape before them suddenly broke into a vast flat plain. However, this plain was a reddish yellow, with no sign of green. It seemed as though all vitality had been severed here. Moreover, the plain was riddled with deep, jagged cracks. Some were so deep they were impossible to see the bottom of, their dark, gaping mouths reminiscent of a demon's jaws. From these abysses, a chilling mist rose, as though they led to the underworld, sending a shiver down their spines. Mu Chen and his companions slowed down slightly, their expressions serious as they looked at the seemingly endless plain. This area must have undergone an extremely terrifying battle in ancient times, Mu Chen said slowly. The jagged cracks were clearly the result of some terrifying force. Perhaps in the distant past, this vast plain, stretching tens of thousands of miles, had been as vibrant as it once was, but after the horrific battle, all life had been extinguished. Even after countless years, the desolation still lingered. It was hard to imagine just how astounding that battle had been. Perhaps after this battle, the wood god temple disappeared without a trace, Luoli said, gazing at the reddish-yellow land. She could see shattered spiritual artifacts scattered across the ground. These artifacts were nearly destroyed, their spiritual power completely gone. Even in the yellow soil, faint traces of bones were visible. Mu Chun nodded slightly, his gaze shifting to the distant surroundings. The sound of wind breaking reached his ears, and soon, figures could be seen descending towards the ground. These were treasure-hunting teams who had arrived at the ancient battlefield and were now searching for any treasures that might have survived the battle. Mu Chun, however, had no intention of probing. While there might be some treasures left behind here, his main goal was not that. According to the direction indicated by the treasure detection compass, it seems we are close to reaching Spiritual Treasure Mountain, when Qingxian said, her delicate hand gripping the glowing compass, suddenly speaking up. Hearing this, Mu Chun immediately perked up. Without wasting any time, his speed surged once again, and he dashed forward. At full speed, after about 10 minutes, the reddish-yellow plain before them began to fade. Streams of light flew over a towering mountain peak, and then Mu Chun and the others suddenly stopped, their astonished gazes turning ahead. Before them stood a mountain bathed in radiant treasure light. The mountain wasn't particularly majestic, but it was completely enveloped in an overwhelming spiritual glow, glittering like a mountain made of precious gemstones, dazzling in its brilliance. Around this mountain, a vast flow of spiritual energy surged like a flood, with a soft, melodious sound, as if echoing through the air, light and graceful. Their eyes, stung by the intense treasure light, squinted as they focused. On the mountain, they saw neatly arranged flat stone platforms, as if crafted from jade, sparkling and translucent. At the center of each platform stood jade lotus altars. In these altars, rare heavenly materials and earth treasures grew, swaying gently in the breeze. Their rich fragrance lingered in the air, soothing the heart and mind. So many spiritual herbs. When Qingxian and the others gazed at the abundance of heavenly materials and earth treasures, their eyes filled with astonishment. These treasures are no ordinary ones. Truly, the Wood Divine Hall's influence is no small matter, when Qingxian said with a gleam in her beautiful eyes. She was very knowledgeable about such treasures, and at a glance, she recognized many well-known heavenly materials and earth treasures, which were highly sought after in the Great Thousand Worlds. Her gaze shifted upward, and she noticed that the rarer treasures grew higher on the mountain, with their spiritual energy emanating more powerfully and pure. Her eyes moved to the very peak, where a blinding light filled the space. It looked as though a blazing sun had grown there, and with the naked eye, it was impossible to discern anything beneath that brilliance. However, it was clear that the treasures at the peak were the rarest of them all. Mu Chun's gaze also fixed on the peak. His eyes betrayed a fervent heat because the light there was exactly the same as the one he had seen in the divine wood steel. Clearly, at the very top of Spiritual Treasure Mountain, the treasure he had longed for, the 9-sun spirit fungus, must be growing there. Unable to contain his excitement, Mu Chun moved swiftly and appeared in midair outside Spiritual Treasure Mountain. From this close distance, he could clearly see the layers of heavenly materials and earth treasures within the mountain. The spiritual plants stretched their crystal-clear leaves, and each flower and fruit radiated extreme purity of spiritual energy. Water spirit fruit, flame spirit flower, dragon scale tree. When Qingshuan's beautiful eyes scanned the scene, her lips making a clicking sound. Finally, she smiled and looked at Mu Chun. It seems you truly haven't let me down. If we take all these treasures, I believe we could even exchange them for some supreme spiritual liquid in the Great Thousand Worlds. The supreme spiritual liquid was a substance that only supreme powerhouses could refine. However, this refining process was exceedingly difficult. Even a first-grade Supreme Powerhouse would likely need an entire month to refine just a single drop of Supreme Spiritual Liquid. Despite the difficulty of refining it, Supreme Spiritual Liquid was one of the most coveted items in the Great Thousand Worlds. It was an essential component in gauging the depth of a faction's foundation. Even Supreme Powerhouses couldn't cultivate without it. It was a divine item that greatly aided cultivation. Chen only knew a little about Supreme Spiritual Liquid, but at this moment, his mind wasn't on that. Though the treasures on Spiritual Treasure Mountain were dazzling, he wasn't greedy. His only desire was the 9 Sun Spirit Fungus at the very peak. What's caught your attention? Luo Li's beautiful eyes turned to Chen. She clearly remembered that Chen had once mentioned there was a spiritual item he had to obtain, and it grew on this Spiritual Treasure Mountain. Chen didn't answer. He just stared intently at the top of Spiritual Treasure Mountain. Luo Li's gaze followed his, and as she looked at the endless light at the peak, a contemplative expression flickered across her clear eyes. She then whispered in surprise, "Is that 9 Sun Spirit Fungus?" Clearly, she had heard of the famous 9 Sun Spirit Fungus before. "Oh, it's the 9 Sun Spirit Fungus? No wonder you're in such a hurry." When Xun'er was also startled for a moment before she looked at Chen and said, "This is a treasure that even Supreme Powerhouses would covet." Chen glanced at Xun'er. "Don't worry, although the 9 Sun Spirit Fungus is extremely rare, it's not worth me." Xun'er, lowering my dignity to steal it. Xun'er seemed to sense the meaning in Chen's eyes and immediately snorted. Chen smiled noncommittally and said, "Since that's the case, I'll make my move." As soon as he spoke, he was about to take action, rushing toward the peak of Spiritual Treasure Mountain to seize the coveted 9 Sun Spirit Fungus. Wait. Just as he was about to move, Xun'er hurriedly grabbed Chen's arm. "What? Changing your mind again?" Chen was startled and smiled. "Pfft," Xun'er spat at him, then quickly released her hand